Over 1 million years ago, podcasting was invented by myself and Chris Fisher, and we created a company, I say, called Jupiter Broadcasting, and that company lives on today, helmed by the one and only, the adorably coiffed Chris Fisher, and he joins me here today. Say hello to the entire universe, my friend.
Hello, entire universe, and hey, B-Man, it's good to be here.
It's good. It has been forever since we've done a show together, my dude. Holy heavens.
Yeah, I think like entire worlds have changed. I have gotten a lot older. I think I've aged at twice speed in the last 5 years. So
at least, yeah. Oh heavens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh heavens. My facial hair has gray throughout it. I'm getting all salt and peppery.
Yeah. Do your kids like to point it out like my kids like to do?
They do.
Dad, your gray hair, Dad.
They do, and then they grab it and pull it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I've also become much better at dad jokes, which my kids sometimes think are hilarious, and other times they just make fun of me for saying them. So I think that means that I am officially old now. So
you want to hear my
exciting.
favorite?
Yes, I do.
What'd the farmer say when he lost his tractor?
What'd the farmer say?
Where's my tractor?
Oh man, I want to high five you right now. That's a fantastic one. I'm using that one. I'm using that one later.
It's good old dad jokes. Kids, it kills. It kills with the kids.
It kills. All right, boy. We started out. We really got world international acclaim, mega famous, by doing the Linux Action Show, right? We kicked off that and we talked about Linux nonstop every friggin' week for 150 years, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
And I thought it would be kind of cool, with all the weirdness that's going on right now, to bring you and me back together again, to talk about where we're at right now and where we're going in the world of Linux, considering that you and I, as far as Linux goes, are probably the two smartest people to ever walk the face of the earth. That's just my
clearly
thoughts.
Best qualified. Yeah,
clearly best qualified. So I want to start this off. I want to lay the groundwork out. Let's ignore the Fedora and Red Hat thing for just a second. Let's put that all off to the side for a moment. I want to come at this from a higher level. I want to start talking about something that has been interesting me for some time, and that I've been writing about and talking about for some time, but I'm not hearing a lot of like the mainstream tech journalists like the ZDNets and everything else talk about. It's not the commercialization of Linux, but the bastardization of the commercialization of Linux. Like when we look at things like the Linux Foundation and how we have mega dollars rolling in from really big companies, from Microsoft to Amazon to just on and on and on, putting in, $500,000 a pop into the Linux Foundation, the foundation that holds the trademarks to Linux, that pays the salaries of Linus Torvalds and Greg Crow-Hartman and all these people. And yet, despite all those mega bucks rolling in, almost none of those dollars reach Linux. Now, what do you think? As we go forward, is this going to be a problem? Is this going to increase? Is this going to decrease? Or am I making a mountain out of a molehill?
I think that at the core of it, what we're experiencing, and it really sucks for Linux and free software, is its centralization. And I was thinking about this from like another angle just recently. I flipped this around in my head and I thought, what if by some weird, crazy alternate universe, Linux was announced 2 years ago, but the cloud still existed. Like maybe Microsoft just became the dominant cloud platform. So everybody, every tech company, every investor, they understood the value of the cloud, and they understood how this new platform could make it cheaper for them to run the cloud at even a larger scale. They would all ape in, all of the VC degens, all of the Microsofts, they would ape into that so hard, like we're seeing with OpenAI right now.
Yeah. Big bucks.
And I think with the Linux Foundation is retroactively doing that, right? Now that people have realized the value, they're kind of retroactively over time building that, what would have probably been just created from the start had Linux launched today. The issue with it is that it's not the commercial companies that really drive all of the lower level stuff. Big name projects and initiatives, sure, and that's what really gets the Linux Foundation's attention.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing, and we see it over and over again with all these different vulnerabilities, is that the smaller decentralized individual developer is completely being left out by the centralization that's taking space in the cloud, even though those cloud apps are ultimately dependent on what those developers are creating. And even as the Linux Foundation makes more money, which they made even more money this last time around, those developers are still being left out.
Yeah, they have, by the way. Oh my goodness, they're raking it in.
I mean, I
don't fault Jim Zemlin,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Sure.
Jim's a nice enough guy, right? But holy heavens, is he raking it in? I mean, he is just going out there with a rake,
It's
pulling
good to
it
be
all
him,
in,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
Scrooge McDucking the heck out of that money.
And it's, I guess, I don't know if I'd say there's no value in the Linux Foundation, because it does seem like there needs to be some kind of interface for these commercial companies to be comfortable enough using this software. Like, it doesn't seem like we wouldn't necessarily have the commercial interaction and scale and funding that we do without something like the Linux Foundation. But I think the Linux Foundation could do that at like 5% its size.
Now, let me
At 5% size what it is now.
I think that's an interesting point, but let me throw a counter argument at you. Before we had the Linux Foundation, we had things like Red Hat already contributing a huge amount to not just the Linux kernel, but the whole ecosystem. I mean, we have things like Network Manager and everything else because of all the work Red Hat put into it, right? But that was all pre and into the early days of the Linux Foundation. If we didn't have the Linux Foundation, I mean, we'd still have companies like Red Hat and SUSE and whatnot, making money hand over fist off of Linux work and contributing back into it. When I look at let's say Microsoft and Amazon, the work they're putting indisputably work back into the Linux kernel and related technologies, right? I mean, most of it's, container Docker, Kuba, Salt, whatever, right? It's mostly that stuff, but they're putting money back in. But if we took out their contributions in terms of code, documentation, everything, Linux as a desktop operating system, as a mobile operating system, even as a server operating system outside of containerized Docker clouds, really wouldn't be that much worse off. I mean, Microsoft gives a lot of code back, but most of it is to make it run better for their specific systems. You know what I mean?
Right. And what the Linux Foundation has kind of enabled is if Red Hat develops something, then the Linux Foundation adopts that, and then it kind of becomes a trench around a standard, and it's kind of the industry standard because it's created by Red Hat and adopted by the Linux Foundation, and then it kind of squeezes other things out. So there's an element of that. But I think, I feel like if we had just the big vendors and we didn't have a Linux Foundation in the middle, I think some things would be better. But I also think you'd have all this infighting that would prevent companies from working together, and so they needed some sort of vendor neutral space where your Canonical and your Red Hat, even though they're rivals, could still work together on some container technology.
Well, that's a pretty good point. I mean, that's a reasonable point. I get when I look at what the Linux Foundation does, it gets me all worked up and grumpy. And part of me wants to just be like,
anything to do with Linux. It's all like just
They do they do vaccine passports.
Right.
I mean, and I don't want to get all politically. I try to stay away from the politics, in the tech side of things. But what the hell does that have to do with Linux?
I think, to Steelman their argument, and I'm not saying I agree, but I think their argument would be, well, if we're going to have vaccine passports, we should have open standards, and we should have one that is implementable across different operating systems, blah 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 blah. Like that would be their logic. Is we need to do this because it needs to be an open standard.
Oh yes. Oh
yeah, and it's obviously just them getting in on a boom and getting some money.
Right. I mean, heavens, they spent more money on blockchain related stuff than Linux stuff.
Yeah. What a waste.
Over the last 2 years.
And I would say I
blockchain's
think you actually
cool. You love blockchain. You love the crypto stuff, but what does that have to do with the?
Well, actually, I think what we've seen is that blockchain.